And welcome to the BAC Podcast, the Bible, Apostolics, and Current Events. Brian Sexton, as always, Pastor Aaron Fairburn. Morning, Pastor.
Good morning. How you doing, brother?
You know what? You just do not have time for me to tell you all the things that are going on here. But no, another episode of the Bible Apostolic Church, the BAC Podcast. Again, like, subscribe, comment. We want to hear from you as well. And we say this on every podcast. We want to hear from you. If there's some topics that you'd like for us to cover, some things you would like to hear about, we are always open for ideas. Listen, this man is a veritable plethora of ideas. This man, not so much, but in the last couple of days, I have advanced to age 53. So, the mind, as the commercial said, is a terrible thing to waste. So, hopefully the mind will stay sharp as I fix these headphones.
Make sure you get your ginkgo.
Well, I'm worried about these headphones. See, okay, so a little bit of behind podcasting, if you will. So we both have on in-ear headphones. And the reason that, some broadcasters like to wear over the ear headphones. I did that for a lot of years doing live radio and things like that. I like these in-ears because they're a little better. When you look like this, you want as pleasing of an aesthetic on YouTube as possible. And so, that's why I like to hide the wire behind the ear and things like that. But you went and got some in-ears yourself, and so that's a good thing. You've been wanting to do that for a while.
Well, that's just the earmuffs are little.
The earmuffs? Those aren't earmuffs, Pastor. They look well. They've got Bluetooth earmuffs now for cold weather. A lot of people like to go jog and run. I don't do any of that stuff. I like to watch people run. I like to watch marathons and instead of running. But they've got Bluetooth earmuffs and things like that. But the earphones that I wear the most are the ones you got me turned on to.
Yeah.
And I wear those. And what I'll do a lot of times, and if I've been out in the cold weather or something, I'll just put a pair of earmuffs on over top of the earphones that I've got, and they work just fine for me.
Yeah, mine just my last pair just tore up, so I told my wife that it's about time to buy another pair. So I've went through. This will be my third or fourth pair. As soon as one goes out, I immediately buy them because they're the best. And this is what I tell. We're not buying them because they have the most phenomenal clarity of sound when you're listening to music, although they sound good. We're buying them because they're the most awesome headphones I've ever had. And I think every time I turn somebody onto it, they're like, man, you're right, to talk on the phone with. Everybody can hear you plain and clear. You can hear everyone. At the same time, your ear holes are open. So if anything's going on around you, you know it's happening. So I love them. And
when I'm listening to stuff, though, my wife says because they are so good that they literally, if you have them up at a certain volume, they'll cancel the noise out in the room as well, too.
Yeah, they can do that.
And so if you're listening, the folks from Shocks open, how many different brands have we kind of secretly promoted here on the BAC podcast? One of these days, Lord, let it happen. One of these days, one of these companies is going to reach out and say, yeah, we'll hook you boys up with some.
I think already.
Swag.
I think I've convinced about 5 other people to buy them. I let people listen to them, and they're like, "Man, that's good."
That they need to already hook you up anyway. So we listen. Don't stray on us yet. This is, we can't go into deep things until you don't just dive into the deep end of the pool. You got to start in the shallow end.
You got to ease in.
Exactly. So, there's a lot. Let me start leading off with this because current events are a part. And so when you watch this on Monday, when it releases, this will have already happened. But later today in Alaska, President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin will be having a meeting. And in the last week, some of the things President Trump has done, you see a pattern with him. And we're good. And then this goes right into what we're going to talk about with leadership. But Pastor, you see a pattern with President Trump of a peacemaker.
He's trying to be a peacemaker, but a lot of people would not agree with that. But you have to understand there's different ways of peace. I think it was President Roosevelt.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Teddy who said, was it walk softly but carry a big
Speak
stick?
softly, carry a big stick.
Carry a big stick, yeah. So I think, Trump has shown strength, and the strength he's shown, it makes negotiation a little easier. People take you more serious.
Mm-hmm.
And so it looks like, I think he said there was a 25% chance. I seen that on my feed. There was a 25% chance that this meeting with Putin goes sour. So I guess that's a way of preparing you for letdown while still trying to say there's a 75% chance that we were.
Well, here's the thing too that I'll say, and the reason I bring up the fact that he's a peacemaker is, earlier this week, he signed an executive order to federalize troops in Washington, D.C. That needed to happen.
It's a 6 month. Yeah.
Yeah. That needed to happen because you can't have your nation's capital be one of the most dangerous cities in the United States. And of course you read about, people getting carjacked at night and things like that. I have a rule for any big city that I'm in. I don't care what it is. I'm in my hotel room by dark. And even most cities that I travel in now, even small rural cities that I travel in, I'm usually in my hotel room by dark because I heard an old football coach, Herm Edwards, say this. Herm Edwards says nothing good happens after midnight.
I try to tell my son that I said he want to go out with his friends to go to cookout. Cookout stays open real late. I tell him, say, son, everything bad happens after dark.
After dark.
Be careful.
Well, and in Trump's case, that's kind of an embarrassing situation when, the nation's capital, people do not feel like they can safely walk the streets. They don't feel like that they can be safe in the nation's capital. How do you, and Trump was like, listen, if the police are not going to do anything, I'm going to you had the Jewish couple. He was about to propose to her, get brutally gunned down in Washington, D.C., carjackings. I heard there was a congressional intern that was shot and killed, with a robbery and things like that. I mean, even, and I saw a video last night. Somebody in Chicago, Illinois said, hey, President Trump, come here next. We have shootings every weekend here. And I think that's coming. I think that's coming. And what will happen is, and this is the horrible thing about it, okay? We should be policing our cities ourselves.
Yeah.
But what's happened is defund the police, this, that, and the other.
Well, it's usually in very strong, not just Democrat, but left, very hard left-leaning cities. And because they kind of follow whatever that push is. And right now that push is basically chaos. Really, what they're trying to do is they're trying to present this idea that it's this underprivileged class that's being persecuted through keeping laws, which is kind of ridiculous, right?
Well, you have effective leadership, and again, has Donald Trump been perfect as president? either time. No, he has not been perfect. But the point is, if I've got to step in because you won't do this for yourself, that's a problem. That's a failure of leadership. Um, it's like if something's going on with your kids and you as the parent have to step in because your kids, I don't care how old they are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's ineffective leadership. Yeah. And what Trump is trying to say is, look, you won't do it, so I'm going to have to. And I could very much see the citizens of Chicago rising up and saying, hey, come here next.
Well, there's a big obstacle for that. The only reason Trump was able to take over Washington was that that's actually part of the way
that's federal law that he has that authority.
He has the authority, and I think it was 70s, 80s, 60s. I don't know that they had actually Washington actually started taking care of itself, ruling itself, yeah. But that statute is there. They always have the ability to come in, and it was just time. I think I've even heard, I didn't actually hear them say it, but I've heard people talk about even hard left-leaning pundits and different people are actually kind of for this because of the danger and because a lot of them live there or work there anyways. They usually live in Maryland or Virginia.
Or West Virginia.
or West Virginia. In some cases. And then they drive into Washington, but it's very dangerous. So,
well, you know why that is? You know why a lot of people work in D.C. and live other places? Because it's so expensive to live in Washington, D.C. It's incredibly expensive to live there, even to go and spend the night there. And I did when I worked up there. I had a medical office that I called on in Chevy Chase, Maryland, which was 5 minutes outside the D.C. border, but the hotel room I stayed in was actually inside the D.C. city limits. And I had to kind of pick and choose when to stay there and when not to, just because of expenses, because it can be very expensive to live there, to stay there, to do anything there. And I'll tell you this, Pastor, a lot of people that live in Washington, D.C., that are permanent residents of Washington, D.C., are very pleased that the president stepped in.
I've heard.
And it's the ones that don't live there that are having the problem with. How is, it's funny to me, how is it that you don't live here, but you got a problem with what's going on? It's like, but you won't come here and live.
Well, it's politics. They can never give him a win. And the Republicans do that too. We tend to see in our nation that when the Democrats do something good, it's rare that the Republicans will really give them that, or vice versa, because we feel we've gotten into this nasty political battle where, when I was young, I could remember it didn't matter who got president. When Bill Clinton got voted in, we rooted for Bill Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted him to do good. That's just how our country was, and they changed. And I think I want to say it changed with Obama, but it didn't. It really began the change with George Bush, the hanging chads.
Mm-hmm.
Because we had a situation where we got divided over who actually won that election, and then from that point on, it was downhill in the nastiness of elections, and then it just ramped up with.
But to your point, after 9/11, you saw a unified country that came and rallied around President Bush.
Yeah, for the first term.
Even if you didn't vote for him, the nation was being attacked. I want to go here with you for just a second. To me, being a pastor and being the president, there's a lot of similarities, because let's face it, the president of the United States, it's a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week, 365 days a year, unless you're the previous president and he was taking 15 weeks of vacation a year. That's pitiful. Absolutely pitiful. And I believe as a pastor, you should take that time off. You've got to have those days off to recharge and things like that. But how do you stay focused on your vision and on your leadership when the expectation is that you're on call, so to speak, 24/7?
Well, it's just something you juggle. I want to tell you if you look back at history in the Bible, particularly, you find out that a pastor's job has changed tremendously. Apostles, none of the apostles, Timothy, none of the early bishops, they never dealt with things that we deal with. For instance, facilities. There was never an issue with facilities. Well, now as a pastor, you have to take care of facilities. You have to make sure that everything's maintained well, that everything looks nice, that it's clean. That was not part of their original, and then, and even throughout history, really pastors did not necessarily have that duty. They may have overseen it, but you had people that done it. We would talk about the last name Sexton. You had people that were caretakers. That they'd done certain things, but we come to modern times, and it's just the expectation. And I don't. Most pastors I've never heard really complain about doing it, but it is an extra, thing on us. But we've been given technology. And so the amount of time that we need to study has gone down as well. I would say that there's, you can learn twice as much in half the time that you used to be able to.
Mm-hmm.
And so that helps. But, maintaining the vision is that can be tough because most churches in America are running around 70 people.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the average size church in America. And at 70 people, you've got a pastor that's really everything, because you're not big enough yet to really have the ability to have the structures in place to have an administrator, to have, and in reality, an administrator is that role that Stephen in the
Mm-hmm.
Bible, those 7 men that were chosen, they really were like chosen as administrators, really, and take care of these smaller things in the church, keep things running, while the apostles devoted themselves to prayer,
Mm-hmm.
to not just preaching the word, but they had to study the word as well. But so they're devoting themselves to these things. So we still have those. We still do that. But like I say, until you get really bigger, a lot of times you don't have that administrator help. We usually, a pastor has his wife.
Well, and here's the thing too, that it would be an interesting case study to understand how many new churches have started since 2020. It feels like that the reason that the church is the size that it is, well, you have this campus, you have that campus, you have this daughter work, you have this and that, and we have taken the church in some respects and segmented it out so that we can, and I'm not trying to be critical, but I wanted to piggyback off what you said. It's almost like so we can plant flags in different places so that we can go, well, yeah, we got that territory covered, or we've got that territory covered. And what I mean by planting flags is, if you remember studying history in the pioneer days, that's how somebody would say, this is my land.
Sure.
They would plant flags.
Yeah.
And that's how people settled.
I think it can really quickly appear that way just because of the culture we're in. But I think most pastors that are doing that have a genuine heart for evangelism and want to see, I think when you go to plant a church in a community that there's one 2 blocks down the road, maybe there's something else.
Well, that's a good point.
But when you're going to plant one in a community that has no apostolic presence,
yep,
then that's different, and we have like around here, we've got plenty of churches, but the reality is, there's not enough.
Yep.
So you might have a church in we've got Well, organizationally, we have, I think, two apostolic churches in three apostolic churches in the city limits of Huntington. A few more that are not UPC, and then we're just outside of Huntington, and you've got another church up Route 2 just outside Lesage.
Yep.
Brother Chapman. And but it's just not enough. If you just take the seating capacity and look at how many people there are, there's just not enough. And really, there used to be a time when churches were planted right down in the community with the idea of walking distance to the church.
That's right.
And now people don't choose churches that way. People choose churches based on personality. How do they fit my personality? And there's nothing wrong with that.
What kind of amenities do they offer? What kind of programs do they have for children? Things like that.
And the main thing is, is this the will of God? And if it's the will of God, you'll see growth. And if you're not seeing growth, then it may not even be your church, maybe you, but you should be seeing growth wherever you're going, and that's important. But leadership is important.
Well, and that's, again, that's why I equate that to the president of the United States and the pastor of a church, because here's the thing, again, the expectations are you vote a pastor in because you have a certain vision. You think that that person can execute the vision of the people. Same thing with the president. 80-some million people voted for President Trump because they thought he was the best choice to execute the vision. And, I look back to election night. He won Wisconsin. He won Michigan. He won Pennsylvania. Those states where it's purple at best in a lot of cases. Right. But people said, I'm going to vote for him. And I think his leadership, what I have seen with President Trump, and this is, again, a correlation to being a pastor, there are some times when a pastor comes in and it's very softly and it's like, and there are times that a pastor comes in and says, okay, you guys voted me in, here we go. And President Trump did that. His second term has been wide open.
Right.
Well, he has come in with
4 years. He knows he's got 4 years to get things accomplished. And his goal is to go down, he's building legacy. He wants to go down as the best president, and I think history will prove out, as divisive as he was, the things he done were phenomenal, But, thinking about Donald Trump.
Okay.
There are certain qualities that make a good leader.
Okay.
And, one of the things we think about when we think of a good leader is confidence.
No question.
A good leader doesn't have confidence, you're not going to follow him. Matter of fact, let me tell you something. You don't have to be a good leader to get people to follow you if you got confidence, because people will follow confidence, and sometimes right off a cliff.
Well, it's okay. There's a fine line, though, between confidence and arrogance. And most good leaders just stay to the left of the arrogant side. It's the leader that gets overconfident and bleeds into the area of arrogance that you start to see a good leader's.
I think that when we're talking about the church, the difference is if you believe, if you have a conviction that God has given you a plan, God has given you a vision of where you're going. To have extreme confidence in that, I don't think you can be arrogant about something God has told you. You just believe it. That's just
what I'm saying with
I think the arrogance could come in when you've devised your own plan,
or you rely too much on your own gifts and abilities.
Yeah.
You have said, "Hey, I don't need to study as much.
Yeah.
I don't need to prepare as much. I've got this. Don't worry about it." Things like that. And again, there is listen, everybody likes to be around people, especially, in leadership, when you have people you can count on. I've got this. That's great. But if it's all the time of, what are you telling me for, man? I've got this. Yeah. Don't you trust me? I've got this. And it's a good leader. It doesn't have to be said, do you have this?
Yeah.
When you delegate something to somebody and you know it and they know it, there's nothing that has to be said. You just delegate you know it's going to get done, and you go on doing the other things you have to do as a leader.
Yeah, that's true. For that's the ideal truth. The reality of the truth is, as a pastor, you often are putting people that are unproven in places because you don't have resources. And so then when you're putting somebody that's unproven, you typically want to watch over them a little more carefully. You want to maybe even help them out their first round just to make sure they, so you micromanage a little bit the first time. Then the second time they go to do it, you just give them a little more autonomy. The third time by themselves. And, ideally, there's this old, it's a old way of teaching, it's I do, you watch. We do together, you do, I watch. And that's one of the best ways to train. But, talking about leadership, talking about good leaders, the Spirit of the Lord, God breathed into man the breath of life.
Right.
I've actually been studying this very subject right now, very deeply, more deeply than I ever have. God breathed into man the breath of life, and man became a living soul. It's very interesting that Isaiah lists out the 7 spirits of the Lord. And it's the Spirit of the Lord, or the Spirit of Yahweh, which is the life-giving force. It is the thing that animates everything else. It's the Spirit of wisdom and understanding. It's the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of the Lord. And the Bible tells us that knowledge is the foundation or the beginning of wisdom, which is really funny because of where they're placed in that list. But when we're talking leadership, we are talking about as God breathed into man, he gave man all 7 qualities. And that was in the man's spirit. And then, man became a living soul, not a living spirit, a living soul. But that spirit got severed. I'm going to give you a little bit of background before I go where I'm going, just quickly. That soul that spirit gets severed from the life giver when Adam and Eve fell. And you know how you can buy a flower, or you can cut a flower and it looks so beautiful and alive, and you can put it in water and take it in your house. And it looks great for a period of time, and then it starts to wither. It's the same with us. When we were cut off from God, man has so long that we look good, but all of a sudden we start to wither and we start to become old, and then we die. It's the same as a flower because we're cut off from that life source. And so as man is cut off from that life source, we're still we're still left with the hue of that life force that God gave us, that Spirit of the Lord that was put in us. And so it's those 7 spirits. And so we're talking about leadership. And leadership comes specifically from these, because all of our mental faculties are derived from God's nature. Wisdom, understanding, counsel, might, and knowledge. So they're built, one's built on another. Fear of the Lord is to be in awe. When you're in awe, there is a curiosity. When there's curiosity, there's knowledge. Knowledge, the basis of learning is curiosity. But once you learn and you have knowledge, then you have a reason for why. You always talk about that. What's your why?
Yeah. If your why isn't clear, your what doesn't matter.
That's right. So once you have knowledge, now you have a reason to do something.
Well, here's the thing too. When you talk about the flower, when that flower is growing where it was planted, it relies on internal sources, the soil that it was planted in, the root that derives its nutrient from the soil. When you cut that flower, you're now depending on external things to keep that thing alive. You're depending on the water that it gets, whether it gets water, how it gets water.
Yeah, water's the only thing that sustains
exactly.
it for a short amount of time.
Or you go buy roses at Kroger or something like that, or a flower shop for your wife, and they give you the little packet of plant food that's supposed to supplement. But again, it's up to you to give that flower the nutrients it needs.
And no matter what you do, you only extend the life of
Exactly.
it. You don't.
The
It's not
flower,
really have
yeah.
life. You just extend how long the rotting process.
Well, the flower is totally dependent on external things to keep it
Sure.
alive, as opposed to when it was in the ground, it drew the water that it needed itself through the root system and things like that. So a lot of times in leadership, you have to pour into somebody for them to continue to grow and extend.
Sure.
Because a lot of times people don't know how to do it. It's one of the reasons why I wrote my book last year, Intentional Encouragement. If you're feeding yourself internally, you don't need a lot of external stimulation.
Yeah.
Because you're feeding yourself internally, you're keeping those positive beliefs stimulated, edified, and promoted. And I think that the challenge for a pastor as a leader is, how do I turn on those things in other people so that I'm not constantly having to stimulate, edify, and promote those things in them myself?
Well, there's natural leaders. Here's the truth. Everybody's not made to be a leader. Everybody's not capable. Maybe on a level, but everybody's not capable. I mean, this is why Jesus talks about there are 100-fold, 60-fold, 30-fold.
Yep.
Some people are never going to become 100-fold. You can't do it. If you don't just innately have it within you, or God doesn't give it to you, you're never going to be a pastor of 1,000 people, no matter how hard you try. It's not there unless God gives it to you, or already had gave it to you. It's just not going to be there, because
you can lead without being a leader.
Well, you can do that, but things will typically, if you can create a leadership team, that's what. But back to this, because a leadership is built on two things. It's built on the spirit of counsel and the spirit of might. Counsel is built upon wisdom and understanding. Wisdom is to see the big picture. Understanding is to know how to, now that I see the big picture, how is it that I can, what is it that I can do, right, to get there? Or what is it I can do to gain advantage from knowing this? How can I act? And counsel is the combination of those two. Counsel it's the ability to create a plan. It's the ability to draw a blueprint. It pulls those two things together.
Well, so here's when you said that was really good. What I envisioned in my mind was a cake, for very simple things, but you envision the cake.
Yeah.
You can see it frosted. You can see the end results, but you have to have eggs. You have to have oil. You have to have flour. You have to have other ingredients. You have to have frosting. Whether you go buy a cake mix and add the eggs and the oil to it, or you're making that cake from scratch, whether you're buying frosting in a can or you're making that frosting from scratch, that cake doesn't happen without the ingredients. Building a house, you can see, people can draw it out. Okay, this is what I want it to look like, things like that. You have to have wood. Well, you have to dig a foundation. You have to have wood. You have to have nails. You have to have drywall. You have to have insulation. You have to have windows. Where am I going to put the heating and air conditioning? How am I going to put the cabinets in? How am I going to lay the floor? You just don't build a house and go, okay, well, I guess we're going to have a concrete, we're just going to.
Oh, some people do.
We're just going to walk. We're just going to walk on the. We're just going to walk on the OSB board we put on the floor, and that's going to be our floor. That it would not be a finished house. And to your point with leaders and vision, a lot of times it's seeing the end result, but understanding the process that has to happen in the steps.
Knowledge in this scenario of your cake, for instance, knowledge is knowing that a cake is made of, here's these ingredients, and wisdom is knowing, wow, this cake, if I make this, is going to taste delicious. Right. It's going to bring me some joy. It's going to be fulfilling, whatever. And then, understanding is the ability to, it's not just knowing where the end is, but sort of how it's done in a sense. It's how do I, it's understanding how does it come together. But counsel is the strategy, the plan. Okay, I've got to gather these. I've got to do this. I've got to do it in this order, and I can make that is counsel, and that's that part. And then let's go to the most important part. No, it's not the most important part. It's an equally important part, which is you have to have might. And might is the ability to get things done. It's execution.
I would say this. We're talking about a cake. I think what you're hitting on with might is the difference of a moist cake and a dry cake.
You might say, but it's really, I would say more about the drive, the will, and the power to get up and actually do it.
Well, and the reason I say that might is the difference between moist and dry is we've got a brother in our church, Brother Scott Rice. Some of the most moist cakes I've ever eaten are from Scott Rice. Fantastic. I went up to him Wednesday night and I said, I don't have in my hand. I don't have a cake here in my hand but his cakes are always moist. They're always good. A cake, I can bake a cake. You can bake a cake. We cut into that thing. My cake's dry. Your cake's moist. They're both cakes, but man, people are going to run to eat your cake. They're going to leave mine sitting. When we have an event at our church, if you don't get a piece of Brother Scott Rice's cake early, you won't get a piece of cake.
And that would come to understanding. That would be, to put some sour cream in that cake.
Well, that's right, Pastor. And that's where the moistness comes in. And I think that the might, and that's why I wanted to say that is the Bible tells us that it's not by might nor by power, but it's by my spirit, saith the Lord. But it's all intertwined because you go to Acts 1:8, and the Bible says you'll receive power after that the Holy Ghost has come upon you. You receive that might.
Well, but we're talking about two different things.
Well,
you're talking about it in a spiritual sense. I'm talking about leadership in the God-given faculties. They come from the Lord, no less. But
what I'm saying is, when you are, and let me come back to where you're at. Let me get where you are. I think I know where you're going with that. The might being, I have to have the strength of the Lord. I have to have the power of the Lord to be able to do this, because if we rely on our own abilities, a lot of times, and I think this is where you're going, and correct me if I'm wrong.
It's a little bit like I'm saying, God can tell you what to do, but if you don't have the drive to get up and do it, don't matter. God can tell you, pray, but guess what? God's not giving you the drive to make you get up and pray. It's when you've got to have the drive to get up. You got to say, look, this is the will of God. I've got to get up and I've got to do this. And that's more or less what I'm saying. Like we're talking about, now in the end, as we explore leadership, you see that counsel of the Lord and prayer and seeking God's direction is a major part of this. But that execution, if you see a leader that is strong on execution and weak on counsel, and we're talking about the mental facilities here. We're talking about the ability to get it done. These are people that they love to just move ahead, get out of the way, let me get it done. And they don't want to think anything through. They're just, I want to get it done. Too much planning. Let's go do it.
Driver.
Those people make messes, huge messes. Now they get things done and eventually they'll make it happen. But along the way, they will mess a lot of things up.
Well, what do we call that? Shoot first and ask questions later? Yeah.
I got two people that come to my mind right now that are phenomenal at that right there. And they will get it done. And sometimes they get so frustrated with the process of planning. They feel like it's just useless. We got to just go. That is a person that is so strong on might. Because when the Bible talks about spirit of might, it's not talking about like the ability to lift a lot of weight or to wield a sword. Right. It's that motivation. It's that drive to go do it, get it done, execute. But if you have somebody who's really strong on counsel, what this means is they have a lot of wisdom, a lot of understanding. And so that counsel is really good. They can strategize and they can create plans, but they never follow through with their plans. They never achieve anything. They got a lot of plans. In other words, we would call those people dreamers. And you have to have both. Both have to come together to create a great leader. Now, it's not that you can't learn some of these behaviors. You can, because God gave us, these are all innate within man because it's in God's spirit. Where do you think we get the ability to have logic, to solve problems for reason? Animals don't possess these. These are, How do you find out what is the qualities that God put in us when he breathed into man the breath of life? Well, you look at what is the different qualities that we have that animals don't have.
Yeah.
That's the difference, because this body is animalistic in its nature. It's just like every body that is in the mammal world out there. They all possess hearts and lungs and blood, and it's all in them. But what's different about man is this ability to forecast, if you will. It's the ability to look into the future and say, if I do this, this, and this, then this is probable to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's the ability to create complex tools. And well, this comes from these 7 spirits of the Lord that's put into man. And they give us our mental faculties, if you will. And so that is where all that's at. That's where leadership is at. And here's the thing. All men are capable of a level of leadership and are supposed to, because we're supposed to be leaders of our homes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as a pastor, I think it's my job, and here's what I can't do. I cannot cause you to have the drive to get things done. I can't give it to you. I can't give you the wisdom to figure it out on your own, to see the big picture. I can hand you the wisdom of the big picture, but I can't put within you the ability to see the big picture. That is something that comes from the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
I can't give you the ability of understanding. I can give you understanding on a subject, but I can't cause you to just, I think sometimes we can hone those skills a little bit through education.
Mm-hmm.
But there's only so much you could do there. We're all made up, sir. But we're talking about leadership. When I think of leadership and I think of characters in the Bible, there's about 3 people that stand out, well, maybe 4, above all the rest. In the Old Testament, the very first character that I think about is Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
Watch this. Joseph has a revelation from God, because good godly leadership always is going to start with the leading of the Lord. The Lord gave him the vision, the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
He got that wisdom from the Lord, and he was able to discern a dream. And the dream said, or the interpretation was, 7 years of good and plenty and 7 years of famine. Now, God did not necessarily lay the plan out for Joseph. But once Joseph done that, Pharaoh says, well, who else better than to do? And so here he goes to put all this together, and he devises a plan, and he calculates. He's able to look into the future, and he's able to see, here's what, if we do this and this and this, we'll do this. We'll preserve the grain here. We'll take so much of the people's, and then we'll hand it back to them. Did you know that Joseph was such a leader? He created a canal that flooded this whole area that was previously desert. And to this day, if you look in Egypt, you'll see it's still it won't read it in English, but if you do the interpretation, it's like the canal or the Lake of Joseph or something like that. It's it's still named after him. He had the wisdom to strategize and come up with a plan, because God done gave him the big vision. And then he had the ability the might to enact the plan.
Mm-hmm.
Then you think of other characters. If you want to think of it in maybe military might, you have Joshua.
Mm-hmm.
And God gives Joshua a vision about, hey, they're getting ready to attack you. Mm-hmm. There's an ambush set for you. Mm-hmm. And he takes that vision and he strategizes with listen, here's the thing. Don't get high-minded and think you're very wise. That wisdom comes from the Lord. If you don't acknowledge God in that, then you're just being hubris and you're going to fall. But it's God that gave it. These powers that we have to be able to think and rationalize and have wisdom, these directly come from the Spirit of the Lord. This is part of the 7 spirits of God that's within man.
Well, I think of Gideon. You want to talk about leadership under pressure. The Lord tells Gideon, you're starting out with what, 20,000?
He narrows it down.
And he says, okay, if they drink the water the certain way, you choose them.
Yeah.
That really narrows it down. He ends up with 300. And they don't go fight with weapons. They've got water pots.
Extreme strategy.
Yes.
And foresight.
Yes.
Really the ability to see.
And so Gideon has to go fight a battle with 300 men. And they've got improvised weaponry.
Yeah.
It's the leader that says we can still accomplish victory with improvised tools or improvised strategy and things like that. And there are times as a leader, you're totally dependent on the people that God sends you.
Absolutely.
Or you're totally dependent on, hey, look, we don't have what everybody else has, but we've got this. Let's do with it what we have and make the best of it. But I believe this. Here's what I believe about Gideon. I believe Gideon stimulated, edified, and promoted those 300 people. And he said, I believe this. I don't have any Bible for it. But I believe he looked every one of them in the eye and said, I believe in you. I believe. And that's the thing with leadership, Pastor, is a lot of times in leadership, if you will just look people in the eye and honestly tell them what you value about them. I was talking to another pastor friend of mine. He's been a friend of mine for 20 plus years. We were talking about a situation. And I said, you know what? There are times in people's lives when you say something to them and it creates a V8 moment. Remember when we were growing up, I wish I could have had a V8. Nobody's ever told them that. You tell them that, it stimulates something within them. Nobody's ever told me that. And so again, when you can help people understand what's valuable about them, then what happens is it multiplies.
Right.
It grows. It moves. And talk about President Trump. You know why? And you know this. People voted. I voted for President Trump 3 times. You know why? Because I felt like when I heard him speak, he was talking to me. President Trump has that ability in situations to make people feel as though he's communicating directly to them.
Right.
In personal moments. You know what? I see you. You know what? I recognize that in you. You know what? And the team that he has put around him this time, that's another good spot of a leader. And let me go back to you in this. What's the most important thing you look for as a leader in somebody you want on your team?
Well, you say the number one thing. There's like several that are so important, but some of them don't matter if they don't have. We're assuming that we're talking about spiritual people to begin with, automatically.
Yep.
And so once that's an understood thing. I would say the very next thing I'm looking for is. I would say that I would use 2 words to describe this because I mean everything that both of them take in: loyalty and faithfulness.
You were thinking exactly what I was thinking. Can I count on you and can I trust you?
Can I count on you? Can I trust you? Are you going to do the job that I'm giving you, or are you going to drop the ball? And ultimately that, it ends up always reflecting on the leader. So, if you give somebody a job, and this happens so often, they start out well. And if they don't start out well, then that's my fault. if they don't start out well, I did not give them the tools they needed to accomplish the job. I've done that before when, especially my first couple of years pastoring, I'd give somebody a job and say, okay, go with it. I would not give them parameters, nothing. And, they're just left like, well, what am I supposed to do? And I've learned that, you have to really start outlining for people and giving them one small piece of that pie at a time. Let them get that done and then give them the next, because the other thing is often I'll overwhelm somebody.
Well, are they capable of doing the job?
Yeah. Well, and then that's the second thing, which is competency.
Right.
Not everybody's competent. And then, not everybody finds, it's, as a pastor, I have to realize that this is my whole entire life. This is where I work. This is my spiritual center. It's everything for me. And sometimes I have to realize that people have other things going, because, not everybody is going to put the high priority that I put on everything church, in my opinion. But it was this way when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, the church should be the center of your social life.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, we did not have, it's not like my parents, we didn't have a bunch of friends outside the church. It was the center of our social life. It was the center of our spiritual life. It was just the center of it all. So today things are not that way in the churches as much. You have some, and I think that that's the kind of culture we need to get back to, because it keeps strong Christians. It fosters growth when that's the case. But, we have people that are besides that, people work less hours and yet they're busier today than they've ever been.
Well, yeah, it's everything else that occupies the side time. And here's what I was thinking about when you were talking about capabilities and things like that. You want folks, when you say, hey, I feel like you could do this job in the church and things like that, not having been a pastor, but being a leader, what you say is, you say, hey, I want you to take this position. And I'm sure with you, because we've talked about it privately, you want that person to exceed what you've given them. Hey, you take this. I never thought about that, but you're doing this in such a way that you have taken that job and broadened it and widened it. And now we have other opportunities from this and things like that.
Within exactly that, within the limitations of, as you're broadening, not broadening your power. This is a thing. It's not super common, but occasionally you will find that you'll put people in a place of leadership and their whole thing is to expand their power, expand their authority. And so they'll want to, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And before long, they've encompassed a huge, like they're in charge or have authority. And it's not that that's not always good. Sometimes it is, especially when you have an administrator. Administrator is the person, that's the Daniel, that's the Joseph that comes in. They run everything. They make sure every little thing is running good. And let me tell you, if you want to grow, that's important. The pastor's main job, we had a conversation. We'd talked about it on the podcast before, where we went and talked to a man that had really cued me in on some things. And that's that my job as pastor, your pastor's job is to get a word, a fresh word, to have a vision, to his role is to feed the sheep. His role is to grow healthy saints. But you need a Daniel. You need Moses tries to do it all, and Jethro gave him some good advice and said, you're going to exhaust yourself. You've got to, and sometimes that's super easy to do. I find out that oftentimes I will try to do that thing right there because I want things done just so exactly this way, that I'll just try to jump in and do it all myself. And then I'm disappointed because I don't have enough time to do everything that I feel like.
Well, Moses had the vision, but the first thing Moses told the Lord when the Lord called him, he said, I am slow of speech. And the Lord said, I'm going to give you Aaron. Aaron's going to be your mouthpiece.
Yeah.
The people still came to Moses for the one-on-one stuff. That's what Jethro was telling him. You're going to exhaust yourself because Moses would sit for hours and hear the counsel of the people. But Aaron was the guy a lot of times that communicated it because he and Moses, that was Moses's brother and things like that. And you need those communicators to say, hey, this is, and you're an excellent communicator. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you need guys and guys and gals of execution. But here's where a lot of times people don't understand. And what I said to you a little while ago about leading without being a leader, I was talking to one of my old bosses one time, and she said, do you want to be a team lead? Do you want to be over people? And I said, no. I said, because I found out I can lead without being a leader. But I think the most important thing that you have to have is you have to understand that, and I've said this to you more times than I can shake a stick at, God didn't call me to pastor this church. He called you to pastor this church. It's my responsibility to be submissive, supportive, and to sacrifice. But I also know what I can do as far as, teaching, preaching. I know that I've got to be prepared. I know that's an expectation. So when it's my time to preach, I've got to be prepared. I've got to have prayed. I've got to have studied. I've got to have prepared. Because, yes, the pastor has a fresh word for the people. But if you're doing preaching and teaching in a church, you've got to supplement that bread. You've got to be the one that, the chef a lot of times is not the one making the dishes.
Right.
In a great restaurant, but the chef is the one making sure that the sous chef has the right ingredients. The chef makes sure that everything is in place. Is the kitchen set up correctly for functionality? Okay, if I've got a pastry chef, does that person have all the ingredients needed? These may be my dishes, or it may be a mixture, but I've got to make sure that they know what to do. And the chef themselves, a lot of times, when it's busy, the chef a lot of times will step in there, and they'll get the job done. I have, not to hijack this part of the conversation, but I have known a man for 30 years. He's the food service director at St. Mary's Hospital, Jameson Uglin. One day I was in there, and he was at the end of the line. They were doing that day's prepping for the cafeteria and things like that. And chef was at the end of the line garnishing each salad. And he said, I want to be the last person that looks at this salad before it gets wrapped and put out there. I want to make sure the finishing touches are on it. They do a gala every year. Chef is, that's the one or two times a year where you'll see, and I still call him chef. He's dressed in his whites, has his chef's hat on. That's his one or two times a year where he dresses out, because that gala is his baby.
Yeah.
That's his thing. And so that's where the vision comes in of that, hey, that finishing touch, or that thing that needs to happen. And leadership in a church is so important, because the pastor can't do it all.
Right. That's right. The pastor's responsibility, his number one responsibility as a pastor. Remember now, the apostles were all in one. All the fivefold ministry was found in an apostle, because they went to establish new territory. But a pastor's number one job is to feed the sheep.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Feed the sheep. As a pastor, my number one job is to feed the sheep. And so to your point, that's the main thing, is making sure that now, of course, we have other responsibilities too. And especially, like I say, in America, you have certain responsibilities culturally. But like I said, the number one thing you have to do is make sure that the sheep get fed. And I believe God gives the shepherd an understanding of what the sheep need, what to be feeding them at certain times. There's times where I can sense that our church needs taught, preached on about love. You feel love start to wane a little bit, and you want to encourage it. Sometimes you can feel maybe it's righteousness. It's faith. It's different things. You can feel that the church is getting low, and there's probably about I'm just throwing a number out there, but just right off the top of my head, probably about a dozen major themes that you have to constantly reiterate for the church. These things is what keeps them healthy, and it's important to do. So as that's what you're mostly doing, is making sure that those sheep get fed the Word of God for what they need at the time.
Yeah.
And it's really, that's one of the most important things we could do. So, obviously, if you're a pastor and you're doing all of the teaching and preaching yourself, number one, you probably get burnt out. However, most pastors are probably like me. I love to do it.
Yeah.
It's more of a sacrifice for me to let other people in there, because I like to do it all the time.
Well, we're very blessed that all of us enjoy doing it. Myself, Brother High, Brother Concrete, we enjoy.
And we have people that are great communicators. But you said communication a while ago, and I was thinking of something that wasn't mentioned, and that is one of the very important things that it's become very important. Always probably has been, is communication that doesn't happen behind a pulpit or behind it's making sure that the church, that there's good two-way communication, that the pastor and the different leadership knows the needs of the saints, and the saints, and at the same time, different things and different directives and things that don't necessarily come from the pulpit, or even if they were and you're not there, that these things are communicated back and forth. I was talking to your wife about that very thing. She's going to be helping us to make sure our communication is down. We've got we've had it for a while, just getting it figured out. Tithely is a phenomenal system, but it is very complicated.
Yeah.
They ought to offer like a week's class to go and learn it. But we can send out emails or text messages, or you can somehow apply it to like a call, but like one call or whatever that is. But it's that communication, the calendar. You have to communicate. Communication is so key to organizing anything. And the church is organized. There's people against organization in the church, but without organization, you don't, everything falls apart. People go their ways. Without organization, there is no church. That's why God is a God of organization. That's why the whole universe is ordered like it is.
Well, that's why Paul in 1 Corinthians 13 and 14, he talks about, and we'll wrap up on this thought, is he talks about, man, every time we come here, everybody's got a psalm, everybody's got a hymn, everybody's got a word, you've got to have that organization. And that's why Paul said, let everything be done in decency and in order, because without communication, it's chaos.
That's right.
If you didn't have stoplights, it would be chaos.
Yeah.
If you didn't have yield signs, it would be chaos. And so you're exactly right. I'm glad you kind of landed the plane right where it needed to be on communication. We could go a lot longer, but the clock on the wall tells us that we need to wrap up this conversation. And again, we'll pick this up. This is good. This is a good topic to do this. Don't forget, like, comment, subscribe, share the BAC podcast. Every 2 weeks on Monday, we drop fresh episodes. And again, Pastor, thank you for your insight on leadership and the importance of it. And we love you. God bless you. For Pastor Aaron Fairburn, Brian Sexton saying, be blessed in Jesus' name.
Amen.